Under the biting cold of a winter storm, Ash stands amidst the snow, his body battered and his heart heavy with a dawning betrayal. The man he called father turns his back, his voice cutting through the wind sharper than any blade as he questions Ash's presence. Clutching his bleeding side, Ash struggles to remain standing, the physical pain nothing compared to the agony of his shattered loyalty. He draws his blade with trembling hands, demanding to know if his entire unit was merely a sacrificial pawn from the very start. Gritting his teeth against the freezing wind, he screams out the title that has defined his entire existence: Father. Roderick turns with a sneer, coldly stating that a wingless failure like Ash has only one purpose: to die for his betters. Fury ignites in Ash's eyes as he stares down the man who gave him his name, Ash A. Elmheim. Sitting upon his throne beneath the crimson crest of the Seven Wings, Roderick had always been the absolute ruler of the continent's greatest military family. Years ago, that same imposing figure had descended like a god to pluck a dying orphan from the snow. But that salvation was a lie, as Ash remembers the years of ridicule he endured from the true-blooded nobility. His adoptive brothers mocked him relentlessly, reminding him that a crestless commoner would never truly belong. Roderick displays the magical tattoo on his back, proof that power in this house is measured solely by the number of wings one possesses. Despite lacking magic, Ash had poured his soul into the sword, his blade glowing with the heat of his sheer determination. He trained until his bones cracked and his muscles screamed, believing that unwavering devotion would one day be recognized. But reality crashes back, as Ash realizes the ambush surrounding them was orchestrated by the very family he sought to protect. Brokenhearted, he accuses Roderick of treachery, unable to comprehend how a father could discard his son so easily. The Duke looks down with utter disgust, ordering the eyesore to vanish from his sight immediately. Driven by a desperate rage, Ash launches himself into the air, bringing his blade down in a final, suicidal strike. Roderick effortlessly perceives the attack, his eyes glowing with the arrogance of a superior being. Steel clashes against magic as father and son collide in a shockwave that scatters the falling snow. A thin line of blood appears on Roderick's cheek, the first time the tyrant has ever been wounded by a mere tool. But the rebellion ends instantly as magical chains bind Ash's body, and his brothers descend with sadistic grins. Blades flash in a cruel rhythm, slicing through Ash's flesh and severing his limbs in a spray of crimson. The brothers laugh maniacally, taunting that a wingless dog belongs in the dirt, crawling like a worm. Ash lies broken in the snow, surrounded by the family that used him, seeing only contempt in their eyes. Coughing up mouthfuls of blood, he asks the question burning in his soul: why save him back then only to discard him now? Roderick squats down, whispering that he never had any use for Ash as a person, but rather for what was inside him. He grabs Ash's hair, revealing that the legendary power of the Seven Wings was actually dormant within the orphan's body all along. Ash's eyes widen in horror as he realizes his potential was stolen, harvested to fuel the man who destroyed him. Roderick sneers, mentioning that Ash's mother was a useful breeder who produced the perfect seed for his harvest. With the truth revealed, the Duke stands up and walks away, leaving his son to rot in the frozen wasteland. Ash reaches out with his remaining hand, his vision blurring as the cold begins to claim him. A final surge of energy erupts, silencing his screams as the darkness swallows him whole. His hand falls limp against the ice, the warmth of life fading rapidly from his fingertips. As his consciousness drifts into the void, he bitterly wonders if his entire life of struggle was truly meaningless. Suddenly, warmth floods his senses, and he snaps his eyes open, greeted not by hell but by falling snowflakes. Panic sets in as he realizes his perspective is wrong. Everything is gigantic, and the cold feels all too real. He tries to stand, but his body is clumsy and wrapped in thick swaddling clothes, lying helpless in the snow. Raising a hand to his face, he is shocked to see the chubby, tiny fingers of an infant. The realization hits him like a thunderbolt. He has not only survived but has been reborn as a helpless baby. Turning his head, he sees the frozen corpse of a woman, his biological mother, who died protecting him in this blizzard. In the distance, the thunder of hooves echoes as a squad of knights scours the storm, hunting for fugitives. The leader shouts orders to his men, demanding they recover the infant stolen by the woman, no matter the cost. Ash's infant eyes burn with golden intensity, realizing these men are Roderick's hounds from the past. A terrifying vision of the Duke looms over him, sensing the power of the Seven Wings that radiates from his tiny body. Ash quickly deduces he has returned to the moment of his rescue, the very start of his tragic loop. He knows that if he stays here, he will be taken by the Elmheim house and doomed to repeat his miserable fate. Summoning every ounce of adult willpower, he forces his tiny limbs to move, frantically crawling away from his mother's body. His breath comes in heavy, ragged gasps, his infant lungs burning as he fights against the deep snow. He drags himself forward, leaving a tiny, determined furrow in the ice, refusing to stop even as his energy fades. Tears freeze on his cheeks, but his golden eyes remain fierce. He swears he will survive without that tyrant's help. He reaches out toward the empty horizon, vowing to one day return and tear Roderick's life apart with his own hands. Exhaustion finally claims him, and his eyes close just as a pair of fine leather boots steps into his blurred vision. A young noble girl turns excitedly, calling out to her father that she has found something buried in the snow. A dignified man with a well-groomed beard steps forward, Viscount Hyfried, a noble of a completely different lineage. He gently lifts the freezing bundle, his expression shifting from curiosity to shock as he holds the child. His gaze travels past the baby, tracing the impossibly long trail of drag marks stretching back through the storm. The Viscount stares at the infant in his arms, utterly bewildered by the sheer willpower radiating from such a tiny creature. Waking up from the snow, Aster finds himself in a soft bed, rubbing his eyes as his vision slowly clears. Three young girls loom over him, their eyes wide with curiosity as they inspect the new arrival. Panic sets in as he realizes he is surrounded, his tiny body helpless against their grabbing hands. The eldest girl with silver hair scoops him up like a doll, declaring him too cute to resist. Refusing to be treated like a toy, he kicks off her chest, launching himself into the air with surprising agility. He hits the floor and scrambles away on all fours, desperate to put distance between himself and his captors. The ginger-haired girl gasps in shock, unable to believe an infant can move with such speed. Ignoring their shouts to stop, Aster crawls frantically down the hallway, hearing the thundering footsteps of the girls chasing him. Suddenly, a golden aura erupts from his body, and he feels gravity losing its grip on him. A beam of uncontrolled magic shoots into the sky, lifting his tiny form high above the palace courtyard. Just as quickly as it came, the power flickers out, sending him plummeting back down toward the hard earth. Before he can hit the ground, a pair of strong arms snatches him from the air, securing him safely against a broad chest. Panting heavily, Aster looks up, his golden eyes wide with fear as he tries to identify his savior. He freezes, recognizing the man holding him as Viscount Hyfried, the older brother of the tyrant Roderick. This man is the head of the branch family, Hyfried A. Elmheim, a figure who was supposed to be a legend of the past. According to history, the Viscount and his entire lineage were wiped out during a brutal civil war years ago. Staring at his own tiny hand, Aster realizes with certainty that he hasn't just been saved. He has traveled back in time. He slaps his forehead in frustration, realizing the irony of fleeing one Elmheim only to be caught by another. Inside the parlor, the Viscount's wife holds Aster gently, deducing that the child's magic went berserk due to fear. She kisses his forehead with a warmth Aster has never known, whispering softly that he is safe now. Hyfried watches closely, his sharp eyes narrowing as he senses the immense energy radiating from the boy. He pulls back the boy's sleeve, revealing the crimson tattoo that marks him as a wielder of the family's greatest power. In the reflection of the mirror, the intricate design of the 7 wings glows unmistakably on Aster's arm. Aster stares at the mark in horror, the symbol of his misery and his father's obsession now branded on his infant skin. He remembers Roderick's cruel words, realizing that the tyrant had hunted him in the future solely for this power. Fury boils in his gut as he understands that his rescue in the previous life was nothing more than a harvest of his potential. The Viscountess looks up at her husband, waiting for his decision on the fate of this powerful, crest-bearing orphan. Hyfried's face is cast in shadow, his expression unreadable as he contemplates the danger the boy represents. Aster breaks into a cold sweat, terrified that he will be handed over to Roderick or killed to prevent a succession crisis. Clenching his tiny fists, he swears internally that he will not let them take his power again. This time, he will use it for revenge. Breaking the silence, Hyfried declares that he will adopt the boy, shielding him from the main house's ambition. He places a large, gentle hand on Aster's head, noting that a bird cannot fly until its wings are strong enough. With a warm smile, he vows to raise the boy as his own, until the day Aster is ready to take flight by his own will. The 3 sisters who had been eavesdropping sigh in relief, happy that their new toy isn't being sent away. Days later, the family gathers in the sunlight, the atmosphere filled with a peace Aster had forgotten existed. The Viscountess bounces him on her knee, asking her daughters and husband what they should name the new star of their house. She looks down at him with a loving smile, deciding on a name that befits his brilliant golden eyes. Lifting him toward the moonlit window that night, she christens him Aster, the new star of the Hyfried family. 10 years pass in the blink of an eye, and the grand architecture of the capital rises to meet the present day. Viscount Hyfried, now showing the gray of wisdom in his hair, arrives at the gates, greeted by his loyal knights. The carriage door opens and a young man steps out, his movements graceful and his demeanor calm. Aster turns back to offer a hand to his adoptive sister, Ulfin, guiding her down the steps with practiced elegance. The once clumsy baby has grown into a dignified noble, while Ulfin has blossomed into a beautiful young woman. They have arrived at the Sword Dance Assembly, the most prestigious annual gathering for the martial nobility. While ostensibly a place for socializing, it is truly a battleground where houses display their military might to intimidate rivals. As they walk the stone path, the heavy sound of boots surrounds them, signaling the arrival of the other noble families. Whispers erupt from the crowd, mocking the Viscount's family for daring to show their faces after years of decline. The shadows of rival nobles loom over them, their red eyes glowing with malice as they gossip about the nobody-adopted heir. Aster ignores the taunts, fixing his gaze on the towering castle that represents the heart of his enemy's power. Behind him, Ulfin flinches at the hostility, her face pale as the pressure of high society crushes down on her. Her hand trembles by her side, knowing that a single show of weakness here could spell the end of their social standing. Aster glances at her shaking hand, his expression remaining stoic but his awareness sharp. Hyfried steps forward, his broad back acting as a shield against the scorn of the other nobles. He turns to his adopted son, asking with a grin if the imposing sight of the Elmheim estate intimidates him. Aster stands tall, his face void of fear, asking his father if he is disappointed by his lack of reaction. A smirk curls on his lips and his golden eyes ignite, declaring that this level of hostility is actually quite comfortable. Hyfried bursts into hearty laughter, reassured that his son has the heart of a true predator. In his past life, Aster had crawled in this very arena, humiliated and beaten into the dirt as a failure. But as he grips the hilt of his sword, he knows that the boy who died in the snow is gone. The wielder of the 7 wings has returned. As they approach the main hall, Aster's gaze drifts up to a high window overlooking the courtyard. 2 figures look down with arrogance, his adoptive brothers from the previous life, the sons of Roderick. Aster lowers his head, hiding the murderous intent that flashes through his eyes. With a confident stride, he walks into the lion's den, ready to turn this dazzling debut into a nightmare for his enemies. The Sword Dance Assembly kicks off in the grand arena, a stage where power is the only language spoken by the nobility. A young knight grinds his teeth, swinging his blade with a desperate need to prove his worth to the spectators. Wind howls through the courtyard as magic-infused swords clash, creating shockwaves that rattle the surrounding architecture. 2 fighters lock in a deadly dance, knowing that in this era, a true knight requires both overwhelming power and graceful fame. A blinding flash of blue energy ends the duel, the sheer force of the strike shattering the stone tiles beneath them. The victor raises his sword high, his silhouette framed by the prestigious wing crest that hangs above the hall. From the viewing balcony, the Hyfried family watches the spectacle, feeling the intense pressure of the gathering. Back at the estate, Aster recalls how his 2 other sisters adamantly refused to attend this barbaric social event. Standing beside the terrified Ulfin, Aster looks completely unbothered, his expression calm amidst the chaos. Ulfin clutches the railing, asking her younger brother if he is nervous about his first official debut. Aster smiles gently, admitting that rather than fear, he feels a strange sense of nostalgia returning to this place. His sister blinks in confusion, unable to understand how a 10-year-old could find a battlefield nostalgic. Viscount Hyfried straightens his coat, announcing that he must step away to greet the other house heads. Ulfin puffs out her chest, trying to sound brave as she claims she is more capable of handling herself than Aster. The Viscount places a heavy, reassuring hand on Aster's shoulder, his eyes communicating a silent message. Leaning in close, he warns his son to make connections, but to strictly keep the power of the 7 wings hidden. With that final command, the father disappears into the crowd, leaving the 2 lambs alone in the wolf's den. Immediately, the atmosphere shifts, and the shadows of hostile nobles seem to stretch out like monsters ready to devour them. Aster scratches his head, annoyed by the blatant hostility radiating from every corner of the room. Deciding to confront the problem head-on, he steps away from the safety of the railing, ignoring Ulfin's panicked cry. He approaches a group of arrogant young nobles lounging on a sofa, locking eyes with a red-haired boy holding a goblet. The tension is palpable as Aster extends a polite hand, greeting the boy as brother-in-law Dariz. With a cheerful, almost mocking smile, he introduces himself as Aster F. Elmheim, the little brother they love to hate. Dariz glares up from his seat, his eyes narrowing as he recognizes the audacity of the intruder. He turns to his lackeys, scoffing as he points out that this is merely the picked-up adopted stray. Bursting into manic laughter, Dariz mocks Aster's middle initial F, claiming it suits a failure perfectly. A dark memory flashes in Aster's mind, the image of Dariz and Grion, the 2 legitimate heirs who brutally murdered him in his past life. But as he looks down at them now, the terrifying monsters of his memories have vanished. Under the spotlight, he sees them for what they truly are, just spoiled children pretending to be adults. Aster's golden eye glows with a cold, predatory light, he realizes he has absolutely nothing to fear. Terrified of the escalating tension, Ulfin grabs Aster's arm, begging him to retreat to safety. Dariz spots the movement and calls out to her, his voice dripping with venomous familiarity. Leaning back with a smirk, he orders Ulfin to come over and entertain them, invoking the authority of the main house. Ulfin trembles but stands her ground, refusing to be treated like a servant by her own relatives. Aster steps between them, physically shielding his sister from the main family's harassment. He grips the hilt of his sword, ready to escalate things if Dariz speaks another word. Dariz's eyes widen with sadistic glee, sensing an opportunity to humiliate them further. He loudly recounts the failure of Ulfin's biological father, mocking how the man couldn't even protect a king. Ulfin flinches as if struck, the cruel words digging into her deepest insecurities about her lineage. Unable to take it anymore, she screams at him to take it back, lunging forward just as Dariz raises his glass. A splash of crimson wine hits her squarely in the face, silencing her outburst instantly. The dark liquid drips from her chin, staining her white dress like blood as Dariz continues his verbal assault. The red-haired bully laughs, taunting that a useless daughter should know her place. Ulfin clutches her dress, tears welling in her eyes as she stands soaked and shamed before the crowd. Aster watches the scene unfold, noting that in the past, seeing their faces would have filled him with uncontrollable rage. But now, looking at his crying sister, he feels a chilling sense of calm instead of anger. Dariz, unsatisfied with just wine, grabs a heavy glass bottle and hurls it directly at Aster's head. With a blur of motion, Aster draws his blade and slices the bottle in midair, showering the bully in wine and glass shards. He stands over the cowering nobles, his sword gleaming and his expression utterly void of mercy. Catching a drop of the splashed wine on his thumb, Aster licks it off, savoring the taste of their fear. He looks down at the terrified Dariz, smirking as he notes that grape juice suits a spoiled brat perfectly. A blinding pillar of golden light erupts from the past, as a younger Aster struggles to contain a power that threatens to consume everything. Behind him, his adoptive sisters scream in terror, tears streaming down their faces as the shockwaves tear the room apart. The silver-haired sister shields the others, begging for the chaos to stop, her voice barely audible over the roaring energy. Aster stands at the center of the devastation, realizing for the first time that the Seven Wings is not a gift, but a cataclysm waiting to happen. Watching from the shadows, Viscount Hyfried grips his sword, wondering if such a volatile force can ever truly be tamed. Back in the present, the heavy doors of the meeting room burst open, interrupting the silence of the noble heads. A frantic knight rushes in, gasping for breath as he delivers urgent news to the gathered lords. He announces that chaos has broken out in the main hall, a duel between the sons of the main house and the branch house. Roderick sits motionless on his throne, while Hyfried's eyes widen in shock, realizing his son is in danger. Without a second thought, the Viscount turns on his heel and sprints out of the room, his cape billowing behind him. He finds Ulfin running toward him in the hallway, her face pale with panic as she tries to explain the situation. Before she can finish, a booming laugh echoes from the courtyard, drawing their attention to the scene below. Grian, the older brother, watches with sadistic amusement as the two combatants face off in the center of the arena. Hyfried grips the railing, his knuckles turning white as he assesses the dangerous situation his children have fallen into. A dark grin spreads across Grian's face, sensing that this gathering is about to turn into a bloodbath. In the arena, Dariz points his blade at Aster, sneering at the fool who dared to challenge a duke's bloodline. Mana flares to life around him, manifesting as four glowing wings that prove his status as a high-ranking noble. His eyes burn with arrogance, taunting Aster to show his own crest if he even has one. Aster stands completely still, his hands relaxed, looking at the display of power with utter boredom. He smirks, remarking that he would be too embarrassed to show off such a pathetic little pattern with so much pride. A vein pops on Dariz's forehead, his ego shattering under the casual insult of a lesser being. The terms are set: if Aster wins, the bully apologizes to Ulfin. If he loses, he becomes Dariz's servant for life. Enraged, Dariz launches himself forward, screaming that he will work Aster until his bones turn to dust. He swings his mana-infused blade with lethal force, aiming to end the duel in a single strike. Aster steps aside with minimal effort, letting the heavy blade carve through the air where his head just was. Dariz roars like a beast, swinging wildly, his movements fueled by rage rather than skill. Aster weaves through the storm of steel, his movements fluid and precise, dodging every strike by a hair's breadth. From the balcony, Ulfin watches with her heart in her throat, terrified for her brother's life. Grian crosses his arms, noting that while Dariz is immature, his raw power should be overwhelming. The arena floor cracks under the pressure of the mana, sending sparks and debris flying with every missed attack. Dariz unleashes a horizontal slash that creates a shockwave of red energy, determined to crush his opponent with brute force. He grins maniacally, asking Aster where all that confidence went now that he's on the defensive. Aster deflects the blow with a flick of his wrist, his golden eyes glowing with intensity as he asks if Darius is done talking. Furious, Darius demands to see Aster's power, summoning a massive cloud of mana to obscure his movements. He leaps high into the air, bringing his sword down in a crushing overhead smash meant to split Aster in two. A spectator watches with a smug grin, convinced that the match has just been decided. But steel meets steel with a ringing clash, as Aster catches the heavy strike with a single hand. Darius' eyes bulge in disbelief, unable to comprehend how a wingless nobody blocked his full power. Aster stares up calmly, telling the red-haired noble that he simply talks too much. With a sudden surge of strength, Aster kicks Darius away, sending him skidding across the stone floor. He stands tall amidst the swirling energy, his stance perfect, radiating the aura of a veteran warrior. For 10 years, he has honed his control in silence, preparing for the exact moment he could crush this family. He raises his sword, his eye flashing with a cold, predatory light as he goes on the offensive. Golden mana erupts from his blade, clashing against the red aura of his cousin in a spectacular explosion of light. Darius' knees buckle under the immense pressure, his four-wing crest failing to withstand the assault. On the sidelines, the blonde-haired brother watches in horror, realizing the tide has completely turned. Aster presses down, his golden aura devouring the red flames, pushing the noble heir to his breaking point. Panic floods Darius' face as he screams internally, unable to believe his superior crest is losing. The spectators gasp in unison, shocked to see a member of the main house being overwhelmed by an adoptee. Aster swipes his hand through the air, tearing through the remaining mana barrier like it is made of paper. Hyfried watches with a mixture of awe and concern, knowing that revealing this much strength is dangerous. The force of the blow smashes into Darius, shattering his defense and his dignity in one motion. Aster looms over him like a demon, his silhouette wreathed in golden fire as he prepares the final blow. Darius shrieks in terror, throwing his hands up to protect his face from the monster he provoked. He lands hard on the ground, a dark stain spreading across his trousers as he wets himself in fear. Aster looks down at the pathetic sight, coldly reminding him to wear rags next time if he plans to soil himself. He sheathes his sword, turning his back on the fallen noble, declaring that he is no longer the wingless victim they once knew. Ulfin leans over the railing, her eyes sparkling with relief and admiration for her brother's victory. Aster smiles up at her, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders as he savors the sweet taste of revenge. But the moment of triumph is cut short as a suffocating red pressure suddenly fills the entire hall. Aster freezes, his instincts screaming danger as he turns toward the source of the overwhelming killing intent. Standing in the doorway bathed in a blood-red aura is the tyrant himself, Duke Roderick. Their eyes lock across the distance, and Aster's gaze hardens, knowing the true battle has just begun. A stunned silence falls over the arena, as the crowd struggles to process the impossible sight of a branch family member standing over the defeated main heir. Heavy footsteps crunch against the snow, the rhythmic sound signaling the arrival of a presence far more terrifying than the duel itself. The eighth head of the Elmheim family, Duke Roderick, stares down at the scene, his cold eyes assessing the failure of his biological son. His expression is one of absolute disappointment, a silent judgment that weighs heavier than any physical blow. Aster meets that gaze without flinching, his golden eyes burning with a defiance that refuses to be extinguished by the Duke's aura. Desperate for validation, Darius crawls forward and clutches his father's leg, crying out like a wounded child seeking comfort. He points a trembling finger at Aster, screeching that the filthy half-breed dared to defy the hierarchy of the main house. Roderick looks down at his groveling son, his eyes glowing with a menacing red light that promises pain rather than pity. Instead of offering a hand, the Duke slams his fist down, crushing the stone floor and his son's weapon in a single brutal motion. Darius screams in agony as shards of his broken blade bite into his hand, his plea for help turned into a punishment. The spectators watch in horror as the young noble writhes on the ground, realize that mercy is a foreign concept to the Lord of Elmheim. Roderick towers over the broken boy, demanding to know why a loser has the audacity to laugh and whine after dragging the family name through the mud. His voice drops to a lethal whisper as he declares that anyone too weak to avenge themselves has no right to exist in his house. With a seamless motion, he raises his sword, fully intending to execute his own son for the crime of weakness. Before the blade can fall, a flash of steel interposes itself, and Aster stands firm, blocking the execution with his own body. Ignoring the Duke's murderous glare, Aster calmly points out that the loser on the ground still hasn't fulfilled the terms of the bet. He looks Roderick in the eye, respectfully but firmly requesting that the punishment wait until Darius has apologized to Ulfin. Roderick sneers, mocking the arrogance of an orphan picked up by his soft-hearted brother. Aster counters instantly, declaring that while he may lack blood ties, he has inherited the pride and honor of a true knight from Viscount Hyfried. The air grows heavy with killing intent as the Duke realizes this stray dog is actually biting back. Roderick steps forward, his aura flaring like a red inferno, accusing Aster of bringing disgrace to the main family with his insolence. But Aster holds his ground, invoking the highest laws of the kingdom and the sacred nature of a duel between knights. From the balcony, the other nobles watch in breathless anticipation, realizing this is no longer a children's spat but a clash of ideologies. Viscount Hyfried grips the hilt of his sword, his muscles tensed as he prepares to intervene if the tyrant goes too far. Roderick brings his blade closer to Aster's neck, asking with a cruel smile what a mere boy is willing to offer up for such defiance. Aster insists that this was a legitimate duel, a necessary response to insults hurled against his house and his sister. He quotes Roderick's own logic back at him, stating that he simply took revenge with his sword, and he has no intention of losing even a single finger for it. Ulfin trembles as she watches her little brother stand toe-to-toe with the most dangerous man in the Empire. On the other side, the blue-haired Grian laughs in disbelief, amused that a 10-year-old is lecturing the Duke on honor. Roderick's expression shifts from annoyance to a terrifying curiosity, deciding to test the limits of this insolent child. He shifts his grip on the sword, acknowledging Aster's resolve but promising to crush it all the same. The Duke steps forward, the stone beneath his boot turning to dust under the sheer weight of his power. Aster flinches as his instincts scream danger, realizing that the monster in front of him is about to strike for real. A massive vertical slash tears through the air, a beam of pure destruction aimed directly at the boy's head. Ulfin covers her mouth to stifle a scream, unable to look away from the impending slaughter. Hyfried roars his brother's name, launching himself from the balcony in a desperate attempt to save his son. The Duke's sword descends like a guillotine, carrying enough force to split the entire building in half. A thunderous clash rings out, shaking the foundations of the palace as steel meets steel. Hyfried lands in front of Aster, his own blade catching the tyrant's strike just inches from the boy's face. The shockwave blows out the windows, sending glass raining down on the terrified guests. As the dust settles, Aster stands trembling but alive, having survived a direct confrontation with the peak of power. Blood drips from his forehead and his vision swims, but the golden fire in his eyes remains unextinguished. Roderick pauses, looking at his older brother who has finally decided to bare his fangs. The ground between the two family heads is pulverized, a physical scar marking the rift in their relationship. Hyfried pushes back, his usual gentle demeanor replaced by the fierce protectiveness of a father. He turns to check on Aster, his voice thick with worry as he asks if the boy is injured. Aster wipes the blood from his eye, grinning wildly as he tells his father that he kept his promise to protect the family honor. The Viscount looks at his adopted son with immense pride, whispering that his bravery was truly magnificent. Roderick turns his back and descends the stairs, his silence signaling a temporary end to the conflict. Grian watches the retreat, noting that stopping now was the only way to save the main family's face from total collapse. The crowd looks at Aster with awe, realizing a new star has risen, one who survived the wrath of the Duke. Hyfried wipes sweat from his brow, joking that he truly thought the House of Elmheim was about to split in two. But as he departs, Roderick's thoughts darken, foreseeing a coming storm that will soon tear the world apart. With the danger past, Aster finally lets his guard down, collapsing into the comforting arms of his family. The training grounds buzz with disbelief, the knights whispering about the impossibility of a branch family member taking down a main house heir. But the deed is done, and the reality of Aster's victory marches through the estate, changing the atmosphere with every step. Aster stands in the morning sun, looking older and sharper, his presence now commanding the respect he fought so hard to earn. Watching from a balcony, the Viscount marvels that such terrifying skill belongs to a boy who is only 10 years old. Down below, the knights gossip with grins on their faces, noting that the young master's training has become borderline suicidal since the duel. One knight adjusts his gear, beaming with pride as he retells the story of how Aster humbled Roderick's third son. For years, the Branch family suffered the main house's disdain in silence, but Aster's victory has finally washed away that shame. Oblivious to the praise, Aster swings a massive wooden training sword, his body moving with the precision of a seasoned warrior. He knows that while the sword dance assembly proved his potential, the Elmheim main house remains a towering mountain he has yet to climb. He smashes through a training dummy with a single blow, his mind consumed by the need to push his limits further. A terrifying vision of Roderick looms in his memory, a reminder that at his current level he would be crushed in an instant. He analyzes his technique mid-swing, realizing that a wing crest is merely an indicator of raw magical capacity, not a guarantee of victory. But raw power is useless without control. a lesson he learns the hard way as he loses his balance and crashes into the dirt. He stares at his hands, frustrated that he still cannot fully unleash the catastrophic power of the 7 wings without losing his mind. Picking himself up, he channels his frustration into speed, tearing through a group of sparring partners in a blur of motion. Bodies litter the ground as Aster stands panting, shouting for the next opponent to step forward, his hunger for strength insatiable. A voice cuts through his focus, noting with a mix of concern and amusement that he is overdoing it again. Ulfin approaches with a confident smile, informing him that their father is requesting his presence immediately. Aster instantly snaps out of his battle trance, dropping his weapon to obey the summons. As he walks toward her, he pauses, his golden eyes widening as he notices her attire. Ulfin notices his stare and turns, the sunlight catching the unfamiliar crimson of her training gear. Aster remarks on the change, recalling that she used to hate such practical clothing because it wasn't cute enough. She closes her eyes and shrugs, admitting that watching him fight made her realize she can't afford to remain a helpless spectator. Aster is genuinely surprised, seeing a new fire in his sister that wasn't there before. She grabs his wooden sword with a playful grin, declaring that once he returns, he owes her a serious sparring session. A genuine laugh escapes Aster's lips, happy to see her growing stronger alongside him. The scene shifts to the sparring grounds, where the siblings prepare to train, leaving the defeated knights groaning in the background. Later, Aster pushes open the heavy doors to the Viscount's office, the weight of the summons pressing on his mind. Viscount Hyfried sits behind his desk, his expression unreadable as he invites his adopted son to sit. Aster takes a seat on the plush velvet chair, sensing that this conversation will shape his future. Hyfried looks at him with a mixture of pride and melancholy, noting that a decade has already passed since he found the boy in the snow. He reaches into his desk, admitting he wanted to wait until Aster was older, but recent events have forced his hand. A velvet cushion is placed on the table, revealing a massive red-jeweled ring sparkling in the sunlight. The Viscount's voice turns solemn as he explains that this ring is the symbol of the next head of the Hyfried house. Aster stares at the heirloom, listening as his father formally asks him to become the successor. Hyfried leans forward, explaining that their branch family is in a precarious position, caught between duty and survival. The estate bathed in the sunset represents thousands of lives and a legacy that must be protected at all costs. Aster hesitates, asking the one question that haunts him: are his adoptive sisters truly okay with this decision? Hyfried reveals that the other sisters, currently away at the Knight Academy, will return in 3 days to discuss it. 2 terrifying avatars manifest in Aster's imagination: the stoic sister Martha and the fiery, aggressive sister Kudo. A cold sweat runs down his back as he realizes Kudo, in particular, will be absolutely furious about being passed over. The Viscount sighs, acknowledging that Kudo despises Aster simply for being born male and blessed with the 7 wings. Aster grips his pants, plagued by guilt and the memory of how his uncontrolled magic nearly killed his sister in the past. He looks down, confessing that he lacks the confidence to face their anger or lead them when he is still so immature. Hyfried watches him closely, noting that Aster's maturity and self-awareness sometimes make him doubt the boy is really a child. With a knowing smile, the Viscount reaches under the desk, revealing a long wooden box intended as a different kind of reward. He suggests that while the ring is heavy with duty, this gift might be more to Aster's liking. He slides the box across the polished wood, the anticipation building in the silent room. Aster opens the lid, his eyes widening as he beholds Graham, the legendary magic-eating sword capable of controlling his unruly power. Deep in the secluded woods, Viscount Hyfried leads Aster away from the mansion, looking for a place where they won't cause collateral damage. Aster asks if the training dojo wouldn't suffice, but his father reminds him that the dojo isn't built to withstand catastrophes. A flashback reveals the crumbling walls and shattered floors of the estate, proof that Aster's training sessions are hazardous to architecture. Hyfried stops and draws a peculiar weapon from his coat, a hilt with no steel known as the demonic sword Graham. Aster stares at the object in shock, confused by the concept of a sword that lacks a blade. The Viscount holds up the empty handle, explaining that this weapon is a conduit designed to give form to the wielder's magic. He pours his mana into the hilt, and the air hums with a terrifying vibration as blue energy floods the metal. A jagged crimson blade materializes from thin air, crackling with unstable and destructive power. The energy swirls violently around the hilt, proving that this is not a tool for the weak-hearted. With a single upward swing, Hyfried releases a beam of pure force that pierces the canopy and shoots into the heavens. The clouds above are split asunder, leaving a massive circular hole in the sky that reveals the blue atmosphere beyond. Hyfried explains that Graham is a magic-eating beast that completes itself by draining the user's power, a test only the strongest can survive. With a challenging grin, he holds the hilt out to his son, asking if he has the courage to tame it. Aster grips the weapon, and instantly his golden mana is violently siphoned into the greedy artifact. The sword glows with a blinding light, reacting to the sheer density of the Seven Wings' power. A massive pillar of red and gold energy erupts, dwarfing the Viscount's previous display and shaking the entire forest. Back at the castle, the knights panic, looking up at the sky and wondering if a comet has just struck the earth. On the balcony, Ulfin watches the spectacle with a sigh, knowing immediately that her brother is the cause of this new disturbance. She mutters his name, realizing that restraint is a word that simply doesn't exist in Aster's vocabulary. In the clearing, Aster sits on the grass, laughing breathlessly as he marvels at the sword's bottomless appetite. Hyfried stares at him, sweat beading on his forehead, utterly stunned by the anomaly he has adopted. He looks up at the swirling vortex in the sky, realizing that the unbelievable thing isn't the sword, but the boy wielding it. Hyfried speaks solemnly, noting that even throughout the entire history of the Elmheim bloodline, the Seven Wings has never appeared before. He turns his back, predicting that if Aster masters this power, he will one day surpass even the Duke and his 6 wings. A vision of Roderick flashes in Hyfried's mind, and he smiles, imagining his son eclipsing the tyrant who cast him aside. But he warns Aster that such overwhelming power will inevitably breed conflict and attract enemies. Aster listens intently, his back radiating the golden aura of the crest that has caused him so much pain and potential. Hyfried lists the dangers: envy, resentment, manipulation, and those who will try to eliminate him as a threat. He reaches out a hand, imploring his son to grow strong now so he won't regret his helplessness when that day comes. The Viscount's face is filled with fatherly concern, offering his support to help Aster navigate the treacherous path ahead. Aster grasps the large hand, his eyes burning with resolve as he swears he will never live a miserable life again. He thanks his father, vowing to master both the cursed sword and the legendary crest. 3 days later, the Viscount and his wife stand in the entrance hall to welcome back their daughters from the academy. The eldest sister, Martha, smiles gracefully, while the second sister, Kudryavka, stands with a fierce, almost combat-ready posture. Kudryavka immediately spreads her arms wide, demanding a reunion hug from her adorable little sisters with aggressive enthusiasm. The younger girls rush into the embrace, welcoming their sister Malfa, but Kudryavka is left standing awkwardly alone. She twitches, asking why no one is rushing to hug her, the second sister. Ulfin bluntly replies that they are avoiding her, because she always messes up their hair with her rough affection. Kudryavka crosses her arms with a huff, claiming that a master of chivalry like herself would never do something so unrefined. But her eyes lock onto Ulfin, and a predatory grin spreads across her face. In a blur of motion, she tackles Ulfin, rubbing her cheek against her sister's face with overwhelming force. Ulfin struggles in the grip of the head rub attack, regretting her decision to speak up. Martha looks around the hall, her smile fading as she asks the question everyone is thinking: where is Aster? The Viscount and his wife exchange awkward glances, hesitant to explain his absence. A massive explosion of red mana erupts from the forest, answering the question more loudly than words ever could. Amidst the falling debris, Aster swings Graham, struggling to keep the volatile energy from tearing him apart. Sweat pours down his face as he grits his teeth, realizing that simply suppressing the sword requires all his concentration. He looks at the glowing hilt, frustrated that he can only manage to form the shape of the blade, not control its output. He wonders how his father wielded it so effortlessly, feeling the gap in their experience. A sarcastic voice praises his flashy performance, and Aster freezes as he recognizes the tone. He turns to see Kudryavka standing at the edge of the clearing, looking unimpressed by his lack of greeting. She smiles, but her eyes are cold, criticizing him for ignoring his sister's return. Aster floats in the air, trying to play it cool, but she cuts him down, asking if he thinks he's too special to notice them now. She mentions the rumors from the academy, how everyone was talking about his victory at the sword dance assembly. Pointing to the Platinum Order medal pinned to her own chest, she notes that she was the one who received the highest honor this year. Her hand rests on her sword hilt as she glares at him, her jealousy palpable in the air. She brings up the rumor that he declined the succession, interpreting it as an insult to her own ambition. Aster realizes with a shock that she thinks he stepped aside out of pity for her, which only wounded her pride more. Footsteps crunch on the grass as she approaches, declaring that she cannot accept his charity. With a smooth motion, she draws her massive greatsword, stating that it is cruel of him to mock her dream of leading the house. She swings the giant blade with terrifying speed, unleashing a shockwave that shears through the trees. Aster barely dodges, jumping back as the ground where he stood is obliterated by her strike. He lands in a crouch, shouting in confusion, asking what she is doing all of a sudden. Kudryavka stands amidst the dust, looking down at him with the eyes of a warrior, not a sister. Resting the heavy blade on her shoulder, she announces that since it's been a while, she's going to test him properly. Aster tries to de-escalate, yelling that his sword is incomplete and he can't fight for real. Kudryavka ignores the plea, asking if he would make the same pathetic excuse to an enemy on the battlefield. Aster blinks, caught off guard by her framing of the situation as a life-or-death encounter. She drops into a low stance, warning him that a knight must always be ready for war, regardless of the circumstances. She launches herself at him, and Aster is forced to slam his blade into the ground to block the heavy impact. Sparks fly as he struggles to hold her back, shouting internally that he is barely managing to keep his own magic from exploding. Red aura flares around his body as he realizes that if he doesn't fight back, she will genuinely crush him. With a desperate cry, he unleashes the power of Graham, clashing against her greatsword in a burst of violent energy.